Welcome to Next in Leadership. You can see we have a brand new set. We have a whole team that's supporting us here, and they designed this set, so I didn't even know it. I just found out about it. Pretty exciting. And so what is Next in Leadership? You're probably wondering. And why are we doing this a big reset? As I go back in my career, I knew in my late teens and early 20s that I was destined for a leadership role. And so I was looking for opportunities post-graduation of high school and college, and I thought, here's where I'm going to go. And I was hoping that someone else would chart a path for me to lead into leadership. And unfortunately, what I quickly realized was there wasn't a curriculum anymore, unlike high school and college. And so I didn't know how to develop and learn. And it took me years to really ask questions of my leaders and read books and consume, at the time, they were books on tape, and just really began to absorb this information. And then for my own self, find leadership roles that really fit what I was looking for my career and beyond. And so as I reflected back, and as I have interacted with many people in that same stage in life that I was in 20 years ago, I recognize there's not a path. And so what do? That's what Next in Leadership is to identify where each and every person's aspirations are and where they want to go long term, and then really chart out a path going forward. And instead of picking a career first and being developed, we're going to develop the individuals first, so that when the opportunity of that career comes along, they're ready and they can step in and keep running. Instead of bouncing from job to job to job, they're directionally walking towards that life they want to live going forward. And so if this is something you're interested in and you want to jump in, you can find us on all the socials at Next in Leadership, on nextinleadership.com. And we have a quiz. That's the starting point. That's day one. That's step one. That is, you fill out a quiz, and in that quiz is going to determine where you're at in that journey. Maybe you're just getting started and you're an explorer. Maybe you've been at this journey for a period of time, or maybe you're a little bit further advanced and you're a builder. Or that third stage, which took me really into my 30s, I became a trailblazer, and that's that third step. And each of those opportunities are going to map back to opportunities that we're going to build on top of going forward. And so then what's new? We got a new studio.
Woo!
And so, woohoo! I mean, couldn't have been designed better. I mean, there's a series of people that were involved in that, so it's going to be fun. And if you're a guest, you'll be sitting right next to me. There's a seat right over here, and you can see this wonderful, beautiful studio. It's huge and amazing. But also, we'll have audio episodes dropping every Tuesday morning, and we're going to expand that. It's going to be an Apple Podcast and Spotify. Mm-hmm. And there'll also be video episodes at 10 a.m. on YouTube. You get to see me. I know that's what you all want. You just don't want to hear me on this beautiful microphone, but you want to see me. And don't worry, I have a change of shirt, so it won't look the same every time. And then we'll combine the live and the interview as well. And so then there's a section that we have. It's called Reed's Roundup. And so where have I been recently? In fact, as we're filming this on a Tuesday, just yesterday, I was on a enormous podcast, actually. Brad Lee's podcast. It'll be released actually late September, early October. He has millions of followers. Had a great conversation with him. I was on his studio, which, I mean, I think this one's better because it says Next in Leadership maybe. But you'll be seeing that. You'll see that circulated on a lot of socials. Right before that, I actually was in Phoenix at a wedding from a longtime family member. My daughter was in it as well. So I get around the country and I see a lot of different people. And I was even with additional people that were considering what's next for them. And so it's always great insight for me while I'm with these individuals in Phoenix and while I'm on this podcast yesterday in Vegas to really understand this generation and where they're going. And, you know, even in that conversation with Brad Lee, since I was just there, you know, he has a ton of people that listen to his podcast that are really looking for the next opportunity. He was telling me they want to invest in their futures, but they don't know the next path. And in fact, specifically, he told me they're afraid of taking that step. And in that process, I think they were deciding a destination, where do they end up? And I said, more importantly, and if this is you at the same stage, find a direction. Because that direction will lead to the destination. I think many times we think just like college graduation is the destination, high school graduation is the destination, a job is the destination. But what we don't look at is what is our direction. And then once we realize our direction, what do we need to go there? And just as we discussed, we need the fundamentals, right? If you're driving somewhere, you need a car, you need gas, and you need people to ride along with you. That's the same thing in a career. You need to have a commitment. You need to be able to show up and be responsible. You need to have some soft skills, and that's what Next in Leadership is all about. So that was Reed's Roundup. Now it's about story time. And so they love this Reed's Rant. Reed's Rant. That's what they think everybody wants. And there's no bigger rant if you're in my family than Apple versus Samsung. How many of you listeners out there, in fact, I know, you guys are all Gen Z. Do you even know what Samsung is? I'll ask.
Yes.
And can you tell Samsung just by the photo quality? Because that's what my kids say. Apple's photo quality is a lot better, and I say actually it's the person you're taking the picture of that's a lot better in the Apple phone.
My Samsung fridges always break down though.
Okay, well, Samsung is in many different areas of our life. Apple is right there. So the question is, Reed's Rant, choose a side, Apple versus Samsung. Well, if you know anything about me, you know that I have aptly named Apple Crapple because that's what I believe that it is. And, you know, I remember when this came out, many of you were not even alive probably when Apple first started creating their products, really in the 80s. And I remember getting my first Apple IIc computer, actually, and I thought this was very innovative, but there was also very limiting because it did not partner with Microsoft. And so my choice is Samsung, and ultimately I'll tell you why, because that's where I choose a side. One, back then, Apple was a closed system. And so there's some advantages of closed system, but that's very short term. And so where do we see that deployed right now? A closed system means you can only access a lot of things on Apple in a closed system, and they release apps, and they only partnered upon their launch with AT&T. Whereas Samsung is an open system. And so they can partner with a lot of phone manufacturers that are unique. They can put their operating system on other things, and the data and digital information is transportable. And so it is less about the product or the phone, even though I believe they've lost also, Apple was not structured for long-term success because the visionary founder, all of the things they've executed on were already in his pipeline and he's been gone for 12 to 15 years. So a closed system leads to closed leadership and a shorter life cycle. I believe that Apple specifically, the life cycle is carried forward because of the early user base. Now, I do want to give credit to Apple, even though I'm still 100% on Samsung's side because they said I have to choose sides and I can't bounce back and forth. I actually love Steve Jobs as a visionary because he didn't get distracted with the short-term people, but he also understood that if you can get a lifelong user, you can have a lifelong business. But the secondary cycle of this, I believe, in the next 20 to 30 years, when Apple's life cycle of their targeted audience are fading and there's continually no innovation beyond one more camera to their phone to give you 3 cameras instead of 2, you will see Samsung and maybe someone else that'll be operating on components of Samsung. So when Apple dies, the whole thing dies. But with Samsung, there'll be components that carry forward. And so that is why I chose a side, because I think the long-term value, and if you listen to me on any of these podcast formats or Next in Leadership, I'm always about long-term value. And Samsung and or the platform structure will have much more long-term value than Apple will. So there is your rant.
What do you think about the branding of Apple compared to Samsung? Because I feel like our generation loves the branding of Apple. Do you think that plays a key figure?
Yeah, so what is branding? I think that brings up a key question, is an emotional connection to a service or a device. So Samsung is, again, I think origin matters a lot here. Samsung is a origin based upon engineering as a Asian brand, right? I believe it's manufactured in Japan. And so what they value in their origin, this is super important to understand about branding. They value things, their culture values. So when you go look at something where it's manufactured on that tag, you see that it's alignment, the manufacturing alignment of the values and the design that was submitted, right? And I've manufactured things all over the world, quite frankly, and partner with people all over the world. And their values cannot be avoided as they're infused in the product they create. And so I think the branding is American branding. Apple was designed with American ideology, and really as you look at the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and really the next generation of addressing that, the branding is aligned with American culture, which is why it's more appealing to American culture. But it isn't as transportable as globally. I mean, I'm sure the adoption in Apple by percentage of users in the United States, because Samsung by quantity of phone is past Apple, is much larger in the US by percentage than other parts of the world because our branding isn't transportable. So I think to answer the branding question directly, I think it aligns with the American ideology of branding, not the global ideology. And America only has 300 million people. The world has 8 billion. So to be determined if that branding is as universal as it goes forward. But I do think they position themselves well in the American market. I think their most iconic 1984 commercial precedes your parents' probably birth, I don't know. But that was an iconic commercial that really established American branding and really put the Super Bowl ads on the map. So there's a lot of things that can be said about how they were executing that, but I still am on the Samsung side. Are you ready to move on?
Okay. What do you want people to take away from this?
Yeah, I think what people to take away is the value of long-term vision is super powerful, right? And so, you know, I was thinking about this yesterday as I was traveling back from Vegas, and I thought there's a lot of people that want to get rich quick, right? And I really see there's 2 parts of that. There's rich and there's quick. And if we had to decide which of those 2 would we choose? And I think Apple's story aligns with that. Samsung is a long-term play. They're integrating into other appliances, TVs, and all this other stuff, and have sustainability and distribution. And it's a long-term play. They'll be there. Whereas Apple was a quick, overnight success, right? There's people standing in line for the phones, waiting for it as well. And so if we really sat down, what's the takeaway? Get rich quick is appealing, but it's not sustainable. And so I pick brands based on sustainability. So I want them to think, what are you doing if you're building your brand, or more importantly, in this instance, your career, that's sustainable? Don't get rich quick by getting a job for 2 weeks, a month, or 2 months, and then you get the income that might be paying $2 or $3 an hour more. What you want is long-term sustainability and viability of that, ultimately, that brand. And so I think that's the thing I would have them take away from this, is that they would ultimately, think about your career long-term, just like Samsung, and say, how am I investing for the long term instead of getting rich quickly? All right. One last quote to remember: invest in the long term, right? Invest in the long term, yourself in the long term. And maybe along that, just to invest in the long term, one thing I realized early on is I said, of all the interactions that I'm going to be in my entire life, I can control 50% of that, and that is me. So I knew to invest in myself so I'm adequately prepared to be ready for the next stage.
How would you recommend people our age to invest in like long-term goals or long-term investments? How would you direct us, lead us?
So I would say separate those two things. The first is, we will, generally speaking, do what feels better short-term and what makes us better long-term. So if you're making a decision and you're standing in front of that and said, not what makes me feel better, what makes me be better, right? So for example, let's say you're sitting at home and it's 9 p.m. It may feel better to Netflix binge. I'll give a very specific example in a story. So yesterday I was flying back. I landed at 8:38 p.m. in Omaha, Nebraska. It was 10 minutes early for my flight, and I was already thinking, what am I going to do with the time? Now, I was on Western Standard Time or Pacific Standard Time and flew back, so it was only about 6:30 at the time I had just left when I landed, and I have about a 28 to 32-minute drive, depending on traffic, home. So I knew that I would pull up, and I ended up pulling up at 9:21 at my house. Now, for those that don't know me, I prefer to exercise twice a week, if not 3 times a week, and Monday nights is the night that I exercise. And so I thought, I can easily distract myself. I get into my house, and then my wife was relaxing, watching a show, and I decided, hey, I'm going to unpack my bag, and I decided to work out, and I was climbing. We have a climbing wall in our house. And so then for 45 minutes, I'm climbing. My daughter pulls up at 10:28. And in that moment, I made that same decision I'm asking everyone else to make. What felt better was sitting on the couch next to my wife, who I hadn't seen that day. I could have easily had a snack, which my kids, say I have too many anyways. But instead, I decided that I would exercise and climb, even after a day of travel. And that's a great example of how you can decide to do that. That was my night last night, and I made a decision to be better instead of feel better, because I knew that if I felt better just relaxing on the couch, eating a snack, versus being better and exercising. And so that's a daily choice that we make.
And you think that starts with leading yourself?
Correct. It starts with leading yourself, right? Because no one told me how to work out, right? No one told me. And many would say, hey, just watch the show with me, right? It's something, a show that I've seen with my wife in the past, and she enjoys telling me about it all, or we enjoy talking about it, I mean. So I think those are things that could be easy choice at the same time as I knew what was the better choice. And so it's leading myself well. And I think, if I talk to leaders that are progressing in their next leadership journey, it's when they can make those decisions without being prompted, without being encouraged, that they're ready for the next step. If someone has to constantly remind you to clean your room or pick up your bag or go work out or, make yourself a meal, you're not ready to lead yourself well, right? I wasn't ready to lead others until I could do things without being consistently reminded. And I think that's a starting point. And that's an explorer. They're realizing, how do you manage yourself well? And if you can't manage yourself well, I can tell you as a manager, I don't want to be managing the basics of somebody. I don't want to remind them to come into work on time every day. I don't want to tell them to bring their lunch. I don't want to tell them they have to clock in or out, right? Those are things that are just leading yourself well, basically. And so those are things to lead myself well. And those are checkpoints for me, even at a developed stage in my career, to say, do I still make the right choices, be better when no one's watching? So that's the first step of leading yourself well, is being better.
Okay, so we're now going to play a game.
Oh, we love games. They're fun.
Okay. Do you want me to explain it, or do you want?
I
Me too.
mean, you can explain it, or I'll just make it up as we go. We can do that
Okay,
in elimination
so
bracket.
the game is an elimination bracket.
Oh, boy.
We have 8 core pillars of leadership. So Reed will go through each. There's 2 pairs for each, and he'll choose which one he thinks is better, and we'll find a final winner.
Oh, boy, exciting.
So the 8 ones are passion, communication, integrity, humility, courage, empathy, resilience, and accountability.
All right, so I'll start in the upper left-hand corner. We got passion and communication. The first one's really tough, right? Because passion, communication, those are both highly ranked. In fact, I would not put communication 8th, even on the ranking bracket, because it's ranked on the other side. I would. They're going against each other, and so this is the top of the bracket. And so I'm going to talk about both, then I'm going to tell you my choice.
Okay.
And so passion is something that just unsatiable. It never stops. It doesn't drive. The drive doesn't stop. I think that's something that I was naturally born with. Early, I had passion, and I think definitely developed. I think, and I think if you're someone that is high on passion, don't let someone take that from you. I think I see a lot of children and even early teens, at some point they lose their passion for something. And many times they lose their passion because someone picked on them or they said something about that. But don't let the opinions of others diffuse your passion. If you're passionate about Legos, if you're passionate about, there's a great construct of it. If you're passionate about communicating, if you're passionate about sports, don't let someone else change your passion, because many times they're hurting your passion because of their insecurities, actually. And so that's the first one. The second is, I would not be where I'm at without my ability to communicate. And as a leader, that is so important, because I can be passionate about something, but if I don't communicate that to others, I'm not bringing people along as a leader. And communication isn't just verbal communication, it's also nonverbal. I remember taking a college course, and 90% of our understanding of something is actually nonverbal and or vocal intonation. And so if I emphasize something with vocal intonation or move my hands, if you're watching the video, that will reinforce the value of that communication. And then even then, we're reading with our eyes to watch whether we can trust that they believe it or we believe it. And so they're the most convincing. And so those two up against each other right out of the gate are super hard. But the winner, dun, 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 I would pick is passion, because I think that passion, I would not be here without it. It's something that's carried me forward. It's something that, win or lose, you have to have passion to carry you forward. And so the second bracket is humility and integrity. And so this is also a difficult one, because I think a lot of people will talk about humility. I have always said your leadership will only go as far as your humility will take you. Because if someone is proud, who wants to be around someone who's proud? If they want to share that. And so one of the things that I have always and really refined in my personal development has been the ability to communicate the value of someone else, right? I reinforce what they bring to that, because I think as the principal leader, the person with the title, naturally I'm going to get a lot more credit than largely is due. Like, for example, I didn't design this room, nor did I design these cue cards, nor did I design this bracket, nor was I even aware of this. I'm just communicating that. And so there's others that are smarter than me and more adept at this next generation that are doing that for me, and I am willing and able to admit that, right? And so that's an element of humility. And if you have humility, that allows others to step into place, right? If you have arrogance, they're going to try to, 1, fight for the position, or 2, then not have the position to step into that. So humility is super important. The second one is integrity. And they say it takes a lifetime to build integrity and a moment to lose it. And, we are only as credible as we are consistent. And that is what integrity is. And so, clearly there's immutable values, right? And that's honesty and communication, but also integrity is also varies in different parts of the world. And so, different cultures value things differently. So that's understanding the cultural mores and making sure that you're living within those well-defined balance. I largely get mine from my faith and the belief system that it was established by God. And I clarify that and reconcile against that on a regular basis. And so, I would not be the leader I am today first if it were not for my integrity. And so I'm going to use integrity as the winner of that one, even though I think humility, you cannot be a great leader without humility. And if you don't have humility, you won't be there, but you won't even start the race without integrity. The next bracket is accountability and resilience. And so look at those two things. First, it's accountability. What does that mean? That means that I hold myself and organizations accountable. right? And those who know me know that if there's a time that I am allocated to be at a particular place or call someone, that I am on the clock. And to me, that is a basic daily accountability. Will I do what I say I'm going to do when I'm going to do it? And so accountability is super critical. And based upon our consistently holding ourselves accountable, we will build ourselves as leaders, right? One of the things my kids know growing up, that if I was there to pick them up at a particular time or drop them off, they knew they were going to be on time, no matter what. Or they could always just look around because I might be driving my wife's car, my car, someone else's car, but I was going to be there, and they may just be around the back of the building, and they could find me. Why? Because I was consistently accountable to myself and my commitments. And so the second one that we're competing with is resilience. And I can tell you resilience is super hard because there are a lot of things that are going to hold us back. In fact, the better you are at something, the more things are going to hold you back, right? You're going to have people hold you back. And, it's interesting to me because I'll go travel. And as we look, even though they're generally speaking looked down upon, the homeless or the others are helped and encouraged more so. People will provide a handout to them of money or exchange and look at and be empathetic to where they're at in life. And yet, me as a leader that's probably accomplished more than that person, I can't speak to that every homeless person, but many of them have accomplished more, they're going to try to hold me back. It's quite interesting. And so thereby, as you accelerate, right, there's resilience. I'll say it another way. If you're on a top 25 bracket in a sports, no one is looking at the 48th person and saying, we got to beat them. They're terrible. Instead, they're having empathy for the person that's 115th in the NCAA tournament. And they're saying, you know what? They just can't get the resource to be successful. But everyone wants to take down the number one guy. And so as you elevate as a leader, resilience is imperative because you have to recognize that everyone is drawing their sword against you because you're the leader and can influence that. And so we see accountability, which is daily holding myself accountable to be that. I wouldn't be the leader if I was that I was today without it. But there's also resilience. I think my answer is resilience because many people can hold themselves accountable and not be a leader. But if you are a leader, you will reach a challenge that you can't overcome without resilience, and that is why it's there. And so then the final two in the 8 is courage and empathy. And so we'll go with courage. Courage is to do something when everyone else is, maybe telling you or held back by fear, telling you shouldn't do it or held back by fear. And that's really that final piece going forward. And I remember early stages in my career, I had to have courage, and I used one little 3-letter word that is in the difference between that. Because many times when we're sitting in a place of fear, we're saying, why me, why me, why me? But if we simply have 3 letters, why not me, that begins to embolden our courage. If we say, why not me, now we're looking at it to say, what don't I have? I remember as I was starting this business or taking a big jump in my career, I would sit back and say, why not me? And I looked around at all the people that had been successful in taking that same plunge. And I said, okay, they had started at a lower place maybe than I was already at that stage when they started their business, or they maybe had less resources to start, or maybe they had less drive and they were, not as willing to learn as I was. And so I began to check the boxes and I realized, even though I'm not excellent at any of these things, there's none of these things that I can't acquire in this journey. Because I made a commitment at the very early stage to take a step forward in courage by recognizing that I was going to commit my time, energy, and effort to understand what I was doing, and that is essentially what gave me the courage to do it. So I emboldened my courage by asking, why not me? That helped me set myself up for success. The second is empathy. Now, of all 8 of these, this is probably the one I rank the lowest. My kids will tell you that I was that dad said, get back in the game. I don't care. Is both your legs broken? Because if it's only one, get back in the game. And so they certainly got empathy from my wife. However, I want to make a clear distinction here because I'm kind of speaking to sympathy a little bit. There's sympathy and empathy. And with regard to sympathy, I think we confuse those a lot of times. Sympathy is actually feeling bad for someone and helping them understand that emotional state that's there. Empathy is saying, I understand where you're at, and I want to help build you a path going forward. And so I do empathize with people. I understand that their position in life, the starting point or even the finishing point is different than mine. And so my empathy would be, hey, I understand where you're at, and I want to give you a path that you can get yourself a ladder and get out of that hole or help you advance going forward. And so that's super, super critical. And I think the strongest relationships that I have is because in that moment, I was one of the most empathetic persons that they were engaging with. That not only, I didn't sympathize with them necessarily to keep them there, I empathized with them and gave them a path going out. And whether that's franchise ownership, whether that's a career that came alongside me, whether that's where they're lost in their lives, I empathized with where they're at. I met them where they're at, and I think it's important where the leader is. I didn't ask them to be where I was at. I met them where they were at and helped them make progress forward to their own direction and determination. And so in the end of the choice between courage and empathy, I would say courage. And the reason I choose courage is because I cannot be empathetic with others if I didn't have the courage to lead. And the courage to lead is super critical to be empathetic with others. Now we're getting down to our final four. And first, as we look at our final four, the first one carried forward is passion, and I gave you the rationale behind that, and the second is integrity. And these are going to get increasingly more difficult because if I have passion but I don't have integrity, I don't have anything. But with the assumption that I can maintain my integrity, I can't make progress forward. And maybe I'll say it this way. Integrity will keep me where I'm at, and I build on top of that. Passion will drive me forward. So I can have integrity without passion, and I cannot be a leader. And so my selection, since I've already described them, is going to be passion, while still maintaining my integrity, but I cannot be the leader that God has intended me to be without the passion and drive to carry that forward with integrity. And now we get to the bottom of that bracket, which is resilience and empathy. Actually, it's resilience and courage. And so it's resilience and courage. And so in those two things, I would say that if I didn't have resiliency, but I had courage, I wouldn't be able to stick with the plan. So I'm going to choose resiliency going forward because many people have courage, but they don't have resiliency. They take one thing and then they don't stick with it. There's no value in courage without resiliency. So I'm choosing resiliency. So that leaves our final two of passion versus resiliency. Well, and this is really a question as I'm weighing these two against each other of doing it for the cause or not stopping because of the cause, right? Are we doing it because we're so driven to win or we don't want to lose, right? And so I'm going to use an NBA analogy for this. If you were watching the NBA Finals this last year, you saw the New York Knicks and the San Antonio Spurs, and the Spurs were up by 20-plus points, and they were trying to be resilient. But in the end, the Knicks won because they had passion. So I'm going to pick passion because the drive to win will always supersede the reason not to stop. And so if you don't have passion to win, if you don't have passion to drive forward, if you don't have passion to lead yourself forward well, you will quit at some point and along the way, and it just won't be sustainable enough. So I'm picking passion as my winner over resiliency. That is the winner of the Pillars of Leadership.
Okay, now what's next?
What's next is I'm going to throw this other card because that was the bracket. So what's next as we're wrapping up this? We're going to have 3 weeks of guest interviews.
Woo!
And that is exciting. I've interviewed some people that I feel like have made that progress as a leader going forward. And you can check out our socials for updates. They'll be on the screen. They'll be linked back and forth at Next in Leadership on Instagram. I'm sure you're already all following, so tell your friends, repost, communicate that. And so the next week's challenge, and what's the challenge for this week is, what is the challenge that ties the theme that you want your watchers to accomplish? That's what I'm going to give you each and every week. So be paying attention to the theme. I'm going to challenge you. What are you learning so that you can do that as the next week's challenge? And you know what I've learned is I'm way better when I'm challenged instead of when I'm coddled. And so that's why we have these challenges. I'm not going to affirm who you already are. We aren't doing you any good if I'm just telling you and I give everybody a ribbon. My job is to challenge you to be better. And your job is to accept that responsibility and be better, not just feel better. I can coddle you and give you a ribbon. You might feel better for a minute. But remember, we're thinking long term. And so I'm excited because next week's guest is Dr. Lindsay Thompson. She's a UNL professor that teaches entrepreneurship. I've spoken in her class for many years now around franchising. And in fact, I've had people that have been in her class that are now part of my organization just because they heard that, whether they're an intern or partnering with me in other entities. And so she is someone that cares about the next in leadership, right? She's sitting in the classroom with this next generation, helping them give direction, and she provides feedback on that. So August 4th, you will be hearing from her and her leadership journey and how she progressed through that leadership journey. And that will also be on Apple, Spotify, and there'll be a video on YouTube you can watch and you can see that interview that I have with her. And so that is what's next.
Yes. So what is the challenge you want people to do? In a month from now, what do you want people to accomplish?
Great question. So the challenge I want them to do is I want them to actually be better.
How?
And how are they going to do that is if you have something that you want to feel better, maybe you're down in the dumps or maybe you're excited. And so if you're sitting there and you're saying, you know what, today's a bad day or today's a great day, don't look at the emotion. Say, one, if it's a bad day, what led it to be a bad day? There's usually something that you did. And I would ask yourself, what did I contribute to making this a bad day? Right? So I'll give another personal story. So as I was arriving home last night, as I already described, my wife said, you got another ticket. Okay, that was a speeding ticket, and it was actually in Germany. Now, in my defense, I was leaving the Autobahn, and I didn't slow down fast enough. But that could have been an easy bad day, right? And so what could I have done differently? I could have probably paid attention and tried not to beat the world land speed record on the Autobahn and probably decelerated a little faster. So I, instead of just being upset about the ticket, ranting to everyone around that, what was a bad day, right? And so that's one thing I could have done instead. I could have made that a bad day and felt about it. Instead, I could say, was it bad enough that I want to change my habit? First question. No, I still will be speeding, but I almost, will consider things a little bit easier so I don't get a ticket. How
We
about
might have to take that out.
Okay, well,
Police
speeding is all
officers
relative. Yes,
watching.
exactly right. Hey, honesty and integrity. I'm being honest, right? I mean, that's what I'm working
Communication.
on. Okay, I'm communicating. Maybe I don't need to do that. So then on the flip side of that, let's say you're having a great day. And let's say what contributed to that, right? And so today's a great day because I'm in this beautiful new studio and I've got these people that are moderating my communication. And so how did I get to a great day is I empowered someone else to take responsibility. And I gave them the resources and autonomy to do that. And so as a leader, a great day for me is seeing someone take an opportunity, run with it, and build with it. So how can I be better in that case? I will look around as a personal challenge myself, and you can look around in your personal challenge and say, how do I empower or delegate something to someone that can handle it well? So I use my intuition to identify that they can handle it well. 2, give them the resource to be able to do it. And then 3, go along and decide to do what they're asking you to do at the same time with my own spin on it. And so if there's someone that had a great day and maybe you got a raise at work, or maybe you had a friend reach out that wanted to hang out with you in a great conversation, look at how you can repeat that activity. Was it questions you had? Was it receptive nature when you had that conversation? Was it going above and beyond at work that got you a raise, right? So look at the things you can duplicate, and that's how you be better. So my challenge for you today is, if there's an emotional response, a bad day, look at what you contributed to make it a bad day, my speeding ticket, or if it's a great day, look at what you contributed and can repeat to make it a great day. And if you do that in the next month, you'll be impressed with the progression you're making because you're eliminating bad days and you're adding good days. So that is my challenge for the month, and I hope in a month to see that you're having more good days because you are better, not because you feel better. Until then, Next in Leadership.
This was Next in Leadership. Yay!
Hey!